On August 5th, 2012, the center of human hope, the center of all human invention and imagination, was a room in Pasadena with 54 people inside doing something very important. There were a few extra people in the room with cameras broadcasting live to the world what these 54 people were doing. There were other rooms in the same building where people could watch through windows or on monitors to see what these 54 people were doing. I was 2,000 miles away in my living room in Chicago, where it was already midnight, holding my sleeping infant daughter in my arms. And like millions of people throughout the world, I was watching on a screen the 54 people in that room. Here's what they were doing. They were holding their breaths and watching the numbers on their screens as the $2.5 billion, 2,000-pound Curiosity rover approached the surface of Mars at 13,000 miles per hour. And they were hoping, and the millions of us watching were hoping, that all of the science and technology and engineering and math that they had used to design some incredible, never-before-attempted, seemingly insane systems to help the biggest, most advanced robotic explorer ever sent to the surface of another planet slow down and hover and land itself without a scratch had worked. Whatever was going to happen had already happened. It takes 14 minutes for any signal from Mars to reach Earth. That's how far away it was. So all that our heroes could do was watch the numbers on their screen, hold their breaths, and hope that every aspect of the entry, descent, and landing system had worked. The supersonic parachute, the retro rockets, the sky crane. That was their job in that moment, to hold their breaths and hope, to carry the hope of humanity on their shoulders and in their faces so that the rest of us would have something to look at. 54 people in a control room at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. And when the one whose job it was finally spoke the words, "Touchdown confirmed, we are safe on Mars," the whole room exploded into screams and jumping up and down, fist-pumping laughter and applause and hugs and tears, and my 2-month-old daughter woke up in my arms to see what the hell was going on. She looked up at my face, tears coming out of my eyes, and I smiled at her, this big, goofy smile, and I said, "We did it! We did it!" Because when anything built on this planet lands on another planet, every living human being should be allowed to say, "We did it." And then she looked at the screen and the still screaming people in that room, and something suddenly became urgent. "Look," I said, "there's a girl." She vaguely glanced at this moving blob of light I was trying to show her. "Look," I said, "there's 2 girls." She went back to sleep. And I counted 7 girls, 47 boys, in what was, in that moment, the most important room in the whole world. I want to find a way to keep all of the doors to all of the important rooms open for my daughters. I have 2 of them now. The baby I held in my arms that night is 3.5. She's planning on becoming the president of Mars, a plan that I may have suggested. My youngest is 7 months old. She's all smiles and potential, and she's a little tight-lipped about her long-term future aspirations. So I want to help her find a way to keep all of the doors to the important rooms open. I would love to find a way to fill those rooms at least halfway with women, so that all of our daughters could look into those rooms as they grow up and easily see themselves there. Young girls need to see role models in whatever careers they may choose, just so they can picture themselves doing those jobs someday. You can't be what you can't see. You know who said that? Sally Ride, first American woman in space. That's right. There are a lot of important rooms in the world, though. Here's one. 20 women, 80 men. That's the United States Senate. 88 women, 347 men. That's the House of Representatives. There are 42 female ambassadors to the United Nations, 151 men. Of the 195 sovereign states recognized by the United Nations, only 22 are led by a woman. Of all the characters who spoke at least one word in the top 100 movies from last year, only 28% were women. So women were 2.5 times more likely to have nothing to say and 3 times more likely to have nothing to wear. 26% of all female characters that appeared in the top movies were fully or partially nude at some point. Only 9% of the guys. This might have something to do with the fact that of the people working behind the scenes, 19% of the producers were women, 11% of the writers, only 2% of the directors. These numbers are not fair. It's no wonder that the maternity policies in this country are abysmal. Like Jessica Shortall told us this morning, those policies are made in rooms that are mostly full of men who mostly don't understand the challenges of new motherhood. And the numbers are improving. Some of these numbers that I've told you about are all-time highs for women. But if we look at the numbers like girls looking to see ourselves in a room, they're not fair. Men and women exist in roughly equal numbers throughout the world. So all things being equal, we should be able to look into any important room and see roughly an equal number of women and men. That's the world we want for our daughters. But that's not the world we have. And though progress is being made at the current rate of progress, the U.S. Congress won't be gender balanced until the year 2121. If you factor in state and local governments, women won't be fairly represented in elected office for almost 500 years. Combine that with the fact that the current astronaut corps is made up of almost 3 times more men than women, and it starts to feel like my daughter's very solid plan of becoming the president of Mars might be a long shot. How do we get rid of these arbitrary gender roles, this subjective, oppressive genderification of jobs and of people? How did each of us end up here in the first place? When I was a little kid, I met Yuri Gagarin, the first human being in space. And when I was in 5th grade, I got to sit in a private room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston while NASA personnel presented to just my family 3 hours of slides and plans about how we might take people to Mars someday. But at 17, I came this close to meeting my hero, this close to the man who changed my life, my way of thinking, this close to the person who was everything I wanted to be, even if I didn't know it yet. It's an almost story that I tell, and the fact that it's only an almost story is one of the important reasons that I'm telling it today. I was a senior in high school. My parents had taken me to New York City to visit some of my top choices for college. We'd been traveling together for a few days, so I was desperate to be rid of them. So there, on the streets of Manhattan, on the edge of manhood, the taste of freedom in my mouth, I told them they had to walk half a block behind me. It felt so good. I didn't know if I was going to end up in New York, but I could, and if I did, I could do it all by myself. Clench my jaw, perfect my don't mess with me stare, and everybody better get out of my way. And then there he was, walking towards me, just to the right, wearing a suit and a trench coat. I saw him, and it was like lightning as he passed. I would have said something, but I couldn't speak. My heart stopped. I literally, involuntarily fell to my knees in the middle of the sidewalk, an honest-to-goodness half swoon. I was so in awe. It was Mr. Rogers. He was this close, and then he was gone. And I ran back to my parents, and I don't know if I called them mommy and daddy in that moment, but it feels like I must have, and I gave them a big hug, and I said with the excitement of a very young child, "It was Mr. Rogers! Did you see? It was Mr. Rogers!" Now, if this were a complete story and not just an almost story, this would be the part where I told you that that moment changed my life, changed my way of thinking, but it didn't. There's no doubt in that moment that Mr. Rogers was my hero. He almost made me faint in the middle of the street. And yet it didn't occur to me, even on this trip that was all about examining my possible futures, that one of those futures might be to follow in his footsteps, a career in early childhood education. It didn't occur to me because that's something girls do. Only 2.8% of preschool and kindergarten teachers in the United States are men. Less than 5% of nannies are men. Less than 4% of stay-at-home parents are men who say they do it because they want to. And the winding path that led me to becoming what I am today, a very proud kindergarten teacher, I've done each of those jobs. And at every point along the way, I had to negotiate and bargain with myself and push back against my own bias about what a man should be. And so now, when someone finds out what I do and asks me with a little bit of surprise, why would a man want to do that? I know what to tell them. Because it's awesome. 85 to 90% of human brain development occurs from birth to age 5. So these kids are learning to walk and talk and think and feel and be. Every day they make huge discoveries about the world and about themselves. They're constructing their own identities, and I get to help them. They're discovering what it means to be a human, and one of the tools that they have is the ability to look around and very quickly absorb the positive biases and the negative biases that their families and the other trusted adults in their lives are showing them. Which group do I belong to? And if I don't belong to that group, how do we feel about that group? We give them these answers, whether we want to or not. So the importance of anti-bias in early childhood education is huge, which is why, at our best, we seek out stories and hang up pictures of firefighters and fighter pilots who are women, of leaders and luminaries who are minorities. We commit to having difficult conversations with very young children about the unfairnesses that exist in our society. And we whisper to those kids in the underrepresented groups, great job. Maybe you'll be a scientist someday. Great leadership. Maybe you'll run for president. But do we whisper to the boys, to our sons? Great gentleness. Maybe someday someone will hire you to take care of their babies. From the point of view of getting rid of gender roles and allowing both women and men to be whole human beings, the single most important thing is that men raise infants and little children as much as women do. You know who said that? Gloria Steinem, feminist icon, first woman on the moon. Not really that last part, but that would be totally awesome. There's still time, NASA, you can do it. When grown-ups understand that children are underrepresented in important rooms, we do the work that it takes to keep the doors to those rooms open so that they can see themselves there, so that they can experience their full humanity, so that they can understand that there's more than one way to be a man or a woman or a human, so they can make their own choices about who they want to become. When we don't push back against the biases that exist all around them, we support those biases through our silence, and all the doors start to close. There are a lot of important rooms in the world. The early childhood classroom is one of the most important. What would happen if all children could look into that room and see themselves there? How big would the ripple effect in our society be if boys and girls could look into that first important classroom and see women and men working together, side by side, in equal numbers, with one purpose: to carry the hope of humanity on our shoulders and in our faces together, so that all of our children can have something to look at from the very beginning. Picture that world. then find a way to show it to a child, because they can't be what they can't see. Thank you. Thank you.